Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Yep, the never-ending story of Moto Guzzi repair. It's not that bad, really. It's a pleasure, to be honest. Yeah, so we're looking at the box. We've got it cleaned up pretty much, and stripped down and inspected her, and all is not lost. Now, if you've never looked at one of these boxes before, they appear to be quite complicated at first, but actually they're very simple, and they're just like, pretty much like a truck gearbox, really, except they've got an extra shaft in them. The way Guzzis work is, because the engine is across the frame, then they can run the drive in a straight line all the way back to the back wheel with a little hop, skip and a jump through the gearbox. Gearbox is in two parts. We've got the main housing here, which bolts onto the back of the engine. That's the bell housing there. Bell housing and gearbox are one piece. Input shaft comes in through here, and we got the lay shaft and the main shaft. Now, problem with this gearbox was she was full of water. The water came in through the rear output shaft and turned into soup, but I don't think the bike had been used very much, thank goodness. Because there is no teeth damage, no teeth wear. Most of the bearings look fine, but I am going to replace the input shaft bearing here. This is the rear housing, which bolts on there, that way. It bolts on there, and this is where the output shaft comes out of. Now, here we go, you see. Now, what was I going to say? Right, yes, so this is it is hooked into the splines in the clutch center and brings the drive into the gearbox here, and there's a bearing, voila, bearing, which fits in there, and a seal which runs on this part here. Now, the bearing looked fine, but then I sprayed it with some carburetor cleaner and shiny bits came out, so yeah, we're going to replace that. We're going to replace the seals as a matter of course. This wasn't too bad, but what I did was I put it in the lathe and spun it with some 2000 grit emery paper and then some metal polish and a cloth and run it around so it's like a mirror now. So that should be a good seal. That should give a good seal. Now, the gearbox output shaft runs on this, and this has a seal too, which is exactly the same as that one, but this was pitted through standing in water. Now, I put it in the lathe and I spun it, and I took as little as I could off. So instead of being just a tad under, what was it, 25 mil? Yeah, I can't remember. Anyway, I took about between 1.15 and 0.2 of a millimeter off it, and then I polished it. And I've got a new seal, and the new seal doesn't fit too bad. But if it does leak, being on the back of the gearbox, it's not going to be that big a deal to change this out. And then this part here is a speedo drive. The speedo drive comes off the side here through, where are we? Speedo drive comes out through there. Now luckily the input shaft and the output shaft bearings are the same, and so is the seal, and the seal is the same as on the fork extensions on this 74. I don't know about the others, but on this bike certainly is. I found out that by accident. So that's a nice tip. Now if you want to know the bearing numbers, that I'm replacing, these are they. The input and output shaft are those, the 3205s, and the seals are those, the 3547.7s. Now the 6303 bearing is this one here, which is not too bad, but it's a fairly cheap bearing. It's about $17 for an SKF or a high quality bearing, so I'm going to change that. These, I put some grease in there to stop the rollers falling out, are open needle roller bearings, and they're okay. There's another one in the gearbox there for the other end of the shaft, and the one down here is this one, and that one's okay. There's no signs of wear or corrosion on that either, so they're staying. They're staying, but these ball bearings are being changed out. Another thing I'm going to change is this thing, which changes the gear, you know, the gear change shaft. The gear lever goes on the end where my fingers are. Now this has got a spring on it, and these springs apparently sometimes break and leave you stuck in gear. Now, I've never had one break, but there is a replacement you can get that instead of having 2 coils there, it's got 3. So I'm going to get one of those and put it in. It doesn't cost much, and it's a whole heap less trouble than having to pull the box out just to change that thing, which costs about, I don't know, $8 or $9. So that's worth doing. So yeah, there we are. If you've never seen one of these gearboxes apart, they've got something unique that most bikes don't have, which is an extra shaft. This one here. Now this is the input shaft. There, it brings the drive from the engine via the clutch into the gearbox, and this is your primary reduction. Primary reduction. So what happens is you've got your primary gears, and that affects the ratio of the whole bike. It's the same that they all do anyway. Now, you can't do much on these bikes to change gear ratios like you can with a chain-driven bike. You can change the rear end to a sidecar gear. You can slow the bike down a bit. And on some models you can change these primary gears. Because what the primary gear does is it brings the power in from the engine, and it's got a shock absorber here. You can see the spring holds it against these ramps. So if you shock load the engine or the rear end, you've got a bit of give there. There's no cush drive on the Eldorado, unfortunately, like there is on some of the later bikes, like there is on my Sparta, for instance, my 1000 SP. Cush drive is a fantastic idea. I love it. But this doesn't have it. So we've got the primary drive, then you've got the gear pairs. Okay. The gears on here are solid, and these are free to rotate. We'll forget about that for the moment. But these are free to rotate, and the gears are engaged by these sliding dogs. These sliding dogs go over and engage the gears. Now there's not much play on that sliding dog. So, and these are helical cut gears which are in constant mesh. They have a little bit of play in them, and they take up the slack. And these boxes are really smooth changing. Unlike the Bravo, which has straight cut gears, and huge gaps in the dogs, and I hate that gearbox. But anyway, that's a different bike. This is really good. The original 4-speeder was like this, and then when they went to 5, they added a thing on the end here, another dog, which engages this gear, which drives that one. And in that case, that is fixed, and this one is floating. So the gearbox is pretty simple, really. There is some malarkey about shimming, but I'm not going to go into that because that's in the books. And hopefully I won't have to do it. Hopefully. Now then, what was I going to show you? Oh yeah, the clutch. Clutch activation is remarkably simple. And this is your clutch shaft. And it goes down through the middle of this. Sorry, your clutch rod. It goes down through the middle of this hollow shaft. and and there it pushes on the clutch center and releases the clutch. So that's pretty good. And it goes in the back of the gearbox here. Anyways, if you can see it, it comes through there. So there's a seal there, and then where the rod goes through, there's seals in here too. They used to be cone-shaped things, but sometimes people put rubber rings in there, which works just as well. So that's that gearbox. Oh, this is the gear change mechanism. This rotates. It's walked around like this. It sort of walks it against these little rods here. I don't know what they're called. Anyway, this turns this. Now these run in these grooves, and then that means that these forks move up and down, and they move these dogs, and they put it into gear or out of gear. So you can only ever get one set of gears in mesh at one particular time, luckily. I don't think it'll go together unless it's completely right. There's not a lot of room when you put these back together, but they do go back together alright if you jiggle and poke around with them a bit. So yeah, that's the Moto Guzzi gearbox. Quite simple, very robust. Built like a brick shithouse, as they say. It looks complex, but then when you put it against an Albion gearbox off an old Royal Enfield, this is space age. The other one is stone age. What else can I say? Oh yeah, a little tool I made here. You don't have to buy the Guzzi one. I made this one afternoon when I was stuck. What this does is it takes the nut, the weird shaped nut, this one, in there. There's a lock washer too, but anyway, that's in there, and that's on the shaft. Which shaft? Yeah, this shaft. And that is on bloody tight, and you will not put a drift in there and try to knock it around, because you can't do it. There's no room. And Moto Guzzi sell a special spanner, which is a great idea to have it, but usually you're stuck on a Sunday afternoon. It's going to take 3 or 4 days to get the part through, especially here where I have to order from the US, when that might be a month before it comes over the border. So I made this tool out of a bit of pipe and an impact socket, a long impact socket. I didn't have a welder where I was broken down. Well, I wasn't really broken down, but I was at somebody else's place. They didn't have a welding machine, otherwise I would have welded it. Instead I drilled it through and put a grade 5 bolt through. Now, this is just a piece of pipe. I cut and filed these things and then bent them out, and I didn't think it would stand up to it, but it does. And they go in there, and then you put an impact gun on it and give it a rattle, and the bloody things fly off. Impact gun is the best way to do it. Don't try to grip it or do anything like that. Just, you know, see if you can borrow steel and impact. Make something like this. All it costs is time. And this is done. I think this is the 3rd box I've used it on now, and it hasn't broken, which is amazing. And I even write on it, look, Guzzi gearbox input shaft nut extractor, undoer, whatever you want to call it. Works like a charm. So that's that. That's my special tool, and when you put this back on again, I use this with a rattle gun, the impact gun. It will not come off. So there we go, Moto Guzzi gearboxes, beginning to put it back together again. Waiting for bearings at the moment. I ordered these from a bearing house. It's bearing store. It's the best way to go. I mean, you can order them through a Guzzi retailer, which is fine. But I like to shop locally if I can, and it's more convenient for me to just run, although it's a 2-hour trip, run into town and get these, and then I know I've got them, rather than hoping that the dealer in the States will have them, and then will they arrive on time, blah-de-da-de-da. So as soon as my bearings come in, I'll put this gearbox back together, but that won't be until the new year. So until then, if I don't speak to you again, have a happy new year. Don't make too many resolutions because you'll never keep them. So take care of yourselves, look after one another. All the best for 2024. Goodbye. Cameras.